So welcome back to my YouTube channel, and this is the second part of this introductory lesson on building your confidence, your vocabulary confidence in French by recognizing the influence of French on your own language and drawing on the similarities, recognizing patterns within your own language. Um, it's not really a surprise that French and English have so many similarities. The parts of the English language are also drawn from Latin, which is a common root with French. And of course, with the Norman invasion of England in 1066, the Norman invaders brought over the French language and imposed it on the natives. So it's a shared language. English is a combination really of German and French and Latin influences. If you can recognize these language patterns between the two languages, then you can start learning the language with a vocabulary, with confidence in a vocabulary of several thousand words already. And I'll show you how that's done. Here's a nice little pattern. Adjectives that end in ibble and able. There are literally hundreds of these between the two languages, and in most cases they are the same in both languages. So you can often guess when you're looking at the French what it's going to mean in English, or if you're looking from the English to translate into French, you can often guess what it would be in French, because in most cases they're the same. There are a few slight changes of spelling. For example, in French, the word for reasonable is raisonnable. In French, the word for comfortable is confortable. And notice there's an N. The third letter is an N for naughty, not an M for mother. But in a lot of cases, these adjectives are identical in spelling with a slight difference in stress and pronunciation. So possible in English becomes possible in French. Visible in English becomes visible in French. Acceptable in English becomes acceptable in French. Flexible in English becomes flexible in French. And as I say, there are hundreds of these, so that already gives you a very strong base to work from. Perhaps my favorite hack between the two languages is the nouns that end in tion or sion. There are more than 2,000 of these, and they're almost always the same in both languages. There are a small number of exceptions, but if in doubt about what an English noun ending in tion or son is in French, just try to say it with a French accent and you'll quite often be right. Um, and the other great thing about this, all of these nouns in French are feminine. Any noun that ends in tion or sion is feminine. There's only one exception, and that is le bastion, which we have the English word bastion, which also means stronghold, and that is le bastion. It's masculine, but all of the others are feminine. So we have, for example, communication in English is communication in French, la communication, feminine. Decision in English is la décision. Notice there's an accent on the E there. Information in English is information in French, l'information feminine, of course. Invitation in English is l'invitation feminine in French. Situation in English is situation in French. Solution in English is solution in French. La solution. Again, here's another little pattern. Abstract nouns, which end in ity in English and end in ite in French. So there's a few hundred of these. So for example, activity in English becomes activité in French. Capacity in English becomes capacité in French. Fragility in English becomes fragilité in French. Nationality in English becomes nationalité in French. Possibility in English becomes possibilité in French. Reality in English becomes réalité in French. To keep the video a reasonable length, I'll just give you one more pattern today. There are lots of other patterns that we can explore later on, but I just wanted to keep this a reasonable length. So the one I'm going to give you is that French words ending in air, so that's A-I-R-E, are often rendered as English words ending in airy, that's A-R-Y. So for instance, the English word imaginary is imaginaire in French. The English word ordinary is ordinaire in French. The English word primary is primaire in French. The English word necessary is nécessaire in French. The English word voluntary is volontaire in French. There are actually hundreds of these, and you get other things like, of course, vocabulaire. The French word vocabulaire translates as vocabulary in English. So we've got loads of these. Extraordinaire becomes extraordinary. And so what I've tried to show you today is that just by using these patterns, you've already given yourself a vocabulary of several hundred words. Obviously, you have to pronounce them with a slight French accent, and be aware of a few exceptions along the way. But these rules are generally quite solid for providing you with a very strong basis in vocabulary, and that can build your confidence. It can allow you to start from a position of strength when you're learning the language, because the two languages have a lot of similarity. So hopefully you found this useful. If you have, please like it, please comment on it, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you have a nice day.